My wife never appreciated what I did for her and made fun of me in front of her friends, so I shamed her and left. I've always been the kind of man who believes in going all in when it comes to relationships. My parents, Walter and Janine, have been married for 40 years, and I grew up watching my dad leave little notes in my mom's purse, bring her flowers every few weeks, and fix every leaky faucet before she even asked. There was no drama, just quiet, consistent love. That became my blueprint. So, when I met Marla, not her real name, at a colleague's retirement party 7 years ago, I brought all of that into our relationship from day one. She was radiant. Not just physically, though her smile could light up a room, but she had this soft, musical laugh and an effortless way of making you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room. We struck up a conversation near the punch table, and by the end of the night, we were swapping Spotify playlists and making dinner plans. At the time, I wasn't especially confident. I worked as a systems analyst, quiet, behind the scenes, the kind of person people rely on but don't necessarily notice. So when someone like her showed interest in someone like me, I was floored. And grateful. I promised myself I'd never give her a reason to doubt that she was cherished. I didn't even think about it, I'd send her favorite snacks to her office on random Tuesdays. If she casually mentioned liking a new pair of shoes, I'd surprise her with them before the end of the week. If she was stressed, I'd clean her apartment while she was out. Thoughtful things, the kind I believed built the foundation of a lasting relationship. And in the beginning, she seemed to love it. She'd beam when I handed her a coffee on a rainy morning. She'd kiss me on the cheek and say, "I'm the luckiest woman alive." And maybe she meant it at first. Maybe she was just someone who wasn't used to being treated kindly. I told myself that a lot. But over time, I noticed something I didn't want to admit. She never gave anything back. Not in gifts, I didn't care about that, but in effort. In thought. In presence. Planning anything was always on me. If there was a family gathering, I organized it. If we traveled, I packed the bags, booked the hotel, researched the spots. When things broke, I fixed them. When bills came in, I paid them. She'd laugh it off, "You're just better at that stuff." And I accepted that for years. Maybe I liked being needed. Maybe I didn't want to believe she was taking advantage of me. Probably both. We got married after 5 years of dating. A small, beautiful ceremony in a garden near her hometown in Michigan. I remember standing across from her, feeling more certain than I'd ever felt in my life. This is it, I thought. I finally get to give someone my whole heart. The first year of marriage was fine. Uneventful, really. But then, slowly, the balance shifted. And because it was subtle, I didn't fight it. I just kept giving. Her requests became more frequent, a designer purse she had to have, a weekend at a spa with her coworkers, a $400 haircut at a place downtown. I made a decent salary, and I wanted her to be happy, so I said yes. Always yes. She got used to it, and so did I. But I started to notice something else. She'd stopped asking me about my day. Stopped checking in on how I was doing. If I came home late or seemed stressed, she barely noticed. When I'd bring it up, gently, she'd dismiss it. "You're overthinking things," she'd say. And maybe I was. But something didn't sit right anymore. Then came the evening that changed everything. I got off work early, project wrapped up ahead of schedule, and decided to surprise Marla. I picked up takeout from her favorite Thai place and headed home, hoping we could share a rare quiet evening together. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed 2 unfamiliar cars. Nothing unusual, her friends often stopped by. But when I walked inside, the air was heavy. The conversation inside stopped immediately. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone's been talking about you? That's what it felt like. Marla stood near the kitchen island with 3 of her friends. They looked like they'd been laughing. Now they looked like they'd been caught. "Oh," she said, voice a little too high. "You're home early." I held up the bag. "Surprise dinner. Thought we could eat together." They all gave these half smiles, awkward, forced. I said hello, tried to keep things light, and set the food down. Marla barely acknowledged it. She turned back to her friends, laughing loudly about some trip they were planning. I told myself I was imagining things. That I was being sensitive. That night, while she slept, something happened. A message from one of her friends, Elise, popped up on my phone. We'd barely spoken, just polite interactions, so I was surprised. It was just one voice message. No text. No context. Heart pounding, I tapped play. It was my wife's voice. I swear, he's like my little house elf, she laughed. Her friends roared. All I do is pout a little and act sweet, bam. Weekend trip. Spa day. Whatever I want. I think I could ask him to organize a parade in my honor and he'd actually try. The laughter continued. One voice, maybe Elisa's, said awkwardly, "That's kind of mean, Marla." But my wife just snorted. Oh please. He doesn't mind. He lives to serve. It's almost embarrassing. The message ended. I just sat there. Still. Numb. Not angry. Not yet. Just hollow. Empty. Because in that moment, something broke. Not because of what she said, but because deep down, I realized, she wasn't wrong. I had let it happen. I had given and never asked for anything in return. And she had never once paused to appreciate it. I didn't sleep that night. I left the house just after 4 a.m., long before Marla would even stir. I didn't pack a bag. Didn't leave a note. Didn't know where I was going. I just drove. The streets were empty, dim, and cold, which matched the way my insides felt, like I'd spent the past few years building a castle from sand while pretending it was marble. I pulled into an old diner an hour outside of town, ordered a coffee I didn't drink, and sat there replaying that message over and over in my mind. Her laugh. The way she said it. The smugness. The ease. She hadn't just taken me for granted. She had mocked me for it, as if the years I spent pouring love into her didn't count because it didn't cost her anything. Something shifted in me that morning. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted out. But I wasn't going to storm out like a scene in a movie. No. I'd leave the way I had lived, quietly, intentionally. On my own terms. I returned just before sunrise. Marla was still asleep. I showered, got dressed, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table like I always did. Except this time, I wasn't planning my day, I was planning my exit. When she finally came into the kitchen, she looked half drowsy but smiled in that automatic way she always did. "Morning," she said, reaching for a mug. "Morning," I replied, flat. She paused mid-pour. Usually, I would have asked her how she slept. Offered to make her breakfast. Mentioned the weather. I said none of those things. Her brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" "I've got some errands to run," I said, getting up and grabbing my keys. She blinked. "On a Saturday?" "Yeah. I'll be back later." And I walked out the door. That day, I opened a new bank account. Closed the credit card we shared. Changed the passwords to everything that had my name on it. I met with a lawyer, a sharp, composed woman named Lydia, who had handled my friend Marcus's divorce 2 years prior. When I told her what was going on, she didn't even blink. "I've seen it before," she said. "You're not crazy, and this isn't a phase. You're just finally ready." I handed her the voice message. I'd already saved a copy and uploaded it to multiple places. Lydia took notes without flinching. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't even going to argue. I was going to withdraw, the same way my wife had emotionally withdrawn from our marriage for the last 3 years. But she was going to feel it now. Back at home, I said nothing about the lawyer. Nothing about the message. Nothing at all. But I started acting different. I stopped bringing her home little gifts. Stopped asking what she wanted for dinner. Stopped anticipating her needs. If she asked me to hang a shelf, I'd tell her I'd get to it, and then wouldn't. If she mentioned some item she just loved, I wouldn't acknowledge it. The first few days, she barely noticed. Then she started trying harder. She'd text me during the workday, something she hadn't done in months. "Hope you're having a good day." I'd respond 6 hours later, "Busy. Talk later." She cooked dinner twice. That was new. I came home the second night to find a full meal prepared: steak, asparagus, roasted potatoes. A little too on the nose. She knew it was my favorite. I made your favorite, she said, all smiles, like it was 2017. Thanks, I replied, hanging up my coat. Then I walked past her to the bedroom and changed. She stood there, stunned. You're not going to eat? I already grabbed something. That was a lie, I hadn't eaten. But I wasn't there to make her feel comfortable anymore. That was the old version of me. And he was gone. A week later, she finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. What's going on with you, Louis? I looked up from my laptop. Nothing. You've been distant. Cold. Are you upset about something? I took a breath, closed the screen, and met her eyes. Just reevaluating some things. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? I've been thinking about what this marriage actually is. What it's built on. She went quiet. For the first time in years, Marla looked like she didn't have a script ready. No sarcasm. No jokes. Just a flicker of unease. I stood. I need some space tonight, I said. I'll be at Nathan's place. That night, I sat on Nathan's worn-out couch and told him everything. The message. The way I'd felt for years. The lawyer. The plan. He leaned forward and put his beer on the table. I never said anything, he admitted, but we all saw it. You gave and gave, man. And she just soaked it all up. Like it was her right. I nodded. You're doing the right thing. And for the first time in months, I believed it. The next day, Marla was waiting when I came home. I didn't sleep, she said, standing in the doorway. I walked past her. She followed. You're not really going to leave me, are you? I turned and looked at her calmly. Do you honestly think I haven't already left? After that conversation, something shifted in the air between us. She knew. Maybe not the full extent, not yet, but enough. Enough to realize she no longer had her usual grip on me. Marla tried different tactics in the days that followed. One morning, she made me breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, the whole spread, music playing softly in the background like we were suddenly starring in a Sunday morning commercial. Thought we could have a quiet morning together, she said, too casually. I nodded. Appreciate it. Then I picked up a banana and left the rest untouched. By the end of the week, she was calling me during the workday, something she hadn't done in years. At first, it was just check-ins, just wanted to say hi. Hope you're having a good day. Then the text started, emojis, throwback photos of us, old inside jokes. I ignored most of them. Responded to a few. Briefly. Dryly. That was when I knew the balance of power had fully shifted. She was chasing something, the version of me who used to bend over backward for her. But he wasn't available anymore. One evening, she stood in the doorway of my office while I worked on a personal design project. Do you remember that time we went to Traverse Bay, and you surprised me with that little cabin? She asked, smiling like she was inviting me into a memory. I didn't look up from my laptop. Yeah. I remember. I think about that a lot, she said. I paused, then replied, I think about how I handled that entire trip by myself while you napped in the car and complained about the Wi-Fi. She went quiet. Then walked away. Meanwhile, I kept preparing. I scanned and stored all our financial records. Made copies of every high-value receipt I'd covered in the last 2 years, spa treatments, luxury accessories, flights she'd taken with friends. My lawyer, Lydia, was meticulous. She built a file so solid it would hold up in any courtroom. We transferred all joint funds into a holding account while she reviewed the documents. I also signed the lease on my new apartment, a modern one-bedroom across town. Clean, quiet, furnished. I didn't tell Marla anything. 2 weeks later, I got a message from Elise, the same woman who had sent me the voice message. She's unraveling, it read. We met for coffee the next day. Elise looked different, not polished and chatty like she used to be. She seemed thoughtful. Measured. She's been asking if I regret sending you that message, she said. I told her I don't. Not even a little. She's still pretending she didn't mean what she said. She says it was a joke, Elise replied. But I think now she realizes it wasn't funny, and it wasn't just about what she said. It's who she was being. I nodded. She's losing her footing. Her friends are drifting. She's quieter now, doesn't throw her usual brunches. She knows what's coming, she just doesn't know when. That was all I needed to hear. A few days later, Marla approached me again. I don't understand what's happening, she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. We're not, this. We don't do this. I tilted my head. No. I didn't do this. You did. She started crying. Tears had always worked before. But now, it just felt like watching someone try to reheat a candle. I know I haven't been the best. But can we please fix this? I looked at her. Truly looked. No, I said calmly. Because you don't miss me. You miss what I did for you. You miss the version of me that allowed you to live in a world where you never had to give anything back. She opened her mouth, I held up my hand. You don't get to rewrite this. Then I walked out. The moment came the following weekend. Steph, one of Marla's close friends, was throwing a dinner party. I'd been invited. I knew Marla would be there. And I knew it would be the perfect moment. Marla brought up the invitation over coffee. I think we should go, she said, testing the waters. We've missed a few things lately, and everyone will be there. I nodded. Sounds good. She blinked. Really? Sure. I wore my best jacket. Pressed shirt. The look of a man who had stopped living in survival mode. We drove in silence. She kept stealing glances at me, trying to decipher my mood. When we arrived, she slid into her usual social character, warm, smiling, full of charm. She laughed too loud. Told stories with a hand on my arm like we were still the couple everyone used to envy. I played along. For a little while. Midway through the meal, Steph raised her glass. So, Marla, she said with a sly smile, when's the next big vacation? You've always got something fun booked. Marla froze, her hand midair. Then forced a laugh. Not sure yet. Steph grinned. Come on. You always said you've got the best travel partner ever. She gestured toward me. Everyone laughed lightly. That was my moment. I reached into my coat, pulled out a white envelope, and placed it gently on the table beside her. Marla glanced down. Then stared. What's this? She asked. Go ahead, I said. Open it. She fumbled with the flap. Remove the papers. Read the top line. Then turned ghost pale. Someone at the table asked, everything all right? Marla tried to speak, nothing came out. I leaned in. They're divorce papers, I said simply. You can keep that copy. The table went silent. Utterly still. Steph looked stunned. Elise stared at the floor. Marla shook her head. Can we talk? Please? I looked at her, not cruelly. Not coldly. Just, done. We're not doing this behind closed doors, I said softly. You never had a problem talking about me in front of everyone before. One of the guests stood awkwardly. Should we give you two a minute? No, I said. Everyone should stay. I think they deserve to know who they've been rooting for all these years. Marla's hands were shaking now. I gave everything I had to this marriage, I continued, voice steady. Time. Support. Love. And you treated it like it was owed. Like it was disposable. Someone whispered, wow. Marla's eyes welled up, but she couldn't speak. You didn't just take me for granted, I said. You laughed at me for it. And the saddest part? You thought I'd never find out. You thought I'd just keep giving. I pushed my chair back. I'm not angry, Marla. I'm just free. And I walked out of the room. I didn't look back when I left that dinner. No one followed me. No one stopped me. The room behind me was a monument to everything that had gone unsaid for too long, until now. I got into my car, closed the door gently, and let the silence settle. It didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a release. That night, Marla called me over and over again. 23 missed calls. I let them all go to voicemail. Each message held a different emotion, confusion, panic, bargaining. She tried anger, then sadness, then desperation. I didn't respond. I wasn't trying to punish her. I just finally understood that I didn't owe her any more of myself. The next morning, I stopped by my parents' house. My mother, Janine, made coffee, and we sat out on the porch like we used to when I was a teenager going through some high school mess. I told her everything. I didn't mean to, it just came out. The voice message. The years of quiet dismissal. The night I drove for hours not knowing where to go. The dinner party. She listened. Patient, soft, focused. When I finished, she reached over and squeezed my hand. You gave what you could, honey, she said. And then some. But giving only matters when someone receives it with care. You didn't leave too soon. You left right on time. That stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, things moved quickly. The paperwork went through without much resistance. My lawyer made sure every financial detail was accounted for, everything I'd covered, everything she'd spent. There wasn't much left in her corner by the end of it. Marla moved out of the house within 10 days. I heard, through Elise and a couple of mutual acquaintances, that she was living in a small rental across town. Her social circle had gone quiet. The brunches stopped. The weekend getaways ended. Apparently, most of the women she used to host had drifted away, too, the ones who laughed at her jokes, tagged along for trips, praised her for how lucky she was. They were gone now. Her phone stopped ringing when the money did. She reached out a few more times, long, emotional emails. Apologies. Explanations. Vague promises that she'd changed. I read them. Once. Then archived them, unread after that. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd learned something. Closure doesn't always come in the form of a conversation. Sometimes, it's just the quiet decision to move forward without waiting for the other person to understand. I settled into my new apartment quickly. It was small, clean, and simple. But it was mine. No unspoken expectations. No quiet judgment about decor. No resentment over how I spent my free time. I started cooking again, not because someone expected it, but because I liked it. I picked up a weekend woodworking class. It was something I'd wanted to try for years, but Marla always made comments about it being a little too suburban. Turns out I was pretty decent at it. I started with small things, coasters, shelves, a picture frame. One day, I carved a little wooden bird and gave it to the barista at the coffee shop I worked near. She lit up like I'd handed her something priceless. No one had ever reacted that way to something I'd made by hand before. And in that moment, I realized something. Being appreciated isn't about grand gestures. It's about someone seeing the small things, and seeing you in them. Months passed. Then, one afternoon, I saw her. I was working from a cafe downtown when I heard my name. I turned, and there she was. Marla looked different. Smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. That radiance she used to carry like armor was gone. She smiled, nervously. Hi, Louis. Hi, I replied, neutral. Can I sit? I paused. Then nodded. She sat across from me, fidgeting with her sleeve. I've been meaning to say this in person. I owe you an apology. I didn't interrupt. I wasn't kind. I wasn't grateful. I think I liked being adored more than I liked being in a marriage. I said nothing. She looked down. I miss who we were. I met her eyes. You miss having someone who built your world for you. Who absorbed your silence and smiled anyway. That wasn't we. That was me, doing the work for both of us. Her eyes filled, but she didn't argue. I'm not angry, I added. But I'm not the person I was then. And I won't ever be again. She nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. I just wanted to say it out loud. Take care, Marla. I stood, tossed my cup, and walked out. I didn't feel triumphant. Didn't feel like I'd won anything. I just felt calm. That's the thing no one tells you about healing. It's not a dramatic scene, or some mountaintop epiphany. It's a quiet Tuesday where you realize you haven't thought about them all week. Where your world feels full, even when it's silent. Eventually, I met someone new. Her name was Joelle, a teacher, soft-spoken but sharp. We met at a gallery showing for local artists, both standing in front of a painting neither of us liked. She didn't expect anything from me. She noticed things. When I made her a wooden bookmark, she treated it like I'd carved it from gold. She didn't need a vacation every month. She just wanted someone who listened. Who showed up. And I did. Because I wanted to. Sometimes, I think back to the version of me that tried so hard to be everything for someone who treated him like nothing. And I feel sad for him. Not because he was weak, but because he had no idea he was allowed to stop trying. If you're reading this and you're where I was, let me tell you something no one said to me. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to expect kindness. And you're allowed to walk away from anyone who doesn't offer it. Love isn't about being needed. It's about being known. And being safe in that knowing. Thanks for sticking through this with me. Wherever you are, whatever your story looks like, I hope you find peace, too. Quiet, steady, real peace. Because it's out there. And you deserve it. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.